Boker Tov, good morning on this Sunday morning. Um, we begin Genesis all anew. We read the Torah, Parshat Bereshit, and I'm going to share a couple of short thoughts that I've shared in the past, but I just feel it's pertinent to the situation that we're in, and therefore I will share it. And that will be our Torah lesson for today. First, we begin with the blessing on the coffee. If you have your own coffee, go ahead and make a bracha as well. Or if not, answer Amen on the bracha over here. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Shehakol Niyah Bidvaro. We also always like to start the Torah class, which we haven't had the Sunday morning Torah class in quite a while because of all the schedule of the holidays. So we begin with some tzedakah in the tzedakah pushka, especially, of course, for our brothers and sisters in Israel, for the hostages. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of mitzvahs going on. I do want to announce that if you want to sort of drop off useful stuff for our soldiers in Israel, you can drop it off here at Chabad. Don't just drop off anything. People call me, we have clothing to donate for, that's not helpful. But there are certain lists of things that we could and will put out that you can bring, and we will get it to Israel, and we'll get it to its proper and useful destination. So, stay tuned for that. But let's get to the parsha. Let's learn a little Torah. So the Torah begins with the word Bereshit, bara Elokim. In the beginning, God created et hashamayim et haaretz, the heavens and the earth. So, as it is said, the reason why the Torah begins with a bet, Bereshit, not with an aleph, which is the first letter, bet is the second letter. So there are various explanations. One of the explanations is that aleph is how the Ten Commandments begin. The Torah, when God gave us the Ten Commandments, God begins with Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God. So that's an aleph. But bet is the creation of the world, to tell us that Torah, meaning the Ten Commandments, representing Torah in general, comes first, and then is Bereshit, the creation of the world, starts with a bet, as we know that the Torah was the blueprint and the purpose of creation. So that's why the Torah begins with a bet, but also the reason given, and is that bet is also the first letter of the word bracha, which means blessing, and God created the world with the intent to provide blessing to creation and so on. And on that note, to share something which we have shared in the past, is that the first thing that God creates is Vayomer Elokim Yehi Or, and God said, let there be light. And the Rebbe very beautifully explains that the reason why light was created first, even though perhaps light wasn't needed until later on in creation, the fourth day or the fifth day, or maybe even the third day, but the reason why light was created first is to tell us that the objective of creation is light, positivity, holiness, which is also represented in light. So the first thing God creates is light, to tell us and teach us that when we find ourselves in a dark and difficult and challenging situation, as we do now, as Am Yisrael, our nation, our people, find ourselves in a most challenging situation that we have not experienced since the Yom Kippur War, and perhaps not even since the Holocaust in some ways, with world anti-Semitism directed against us. Yet at the same time, we know that Am Levadad Yishkon, it's a nation that dwells alone. But we have Hashem on our side, and we do have many supporters and friends amongst the other nations. But yet we're in a very dark period, And as a result, the Torah tells us, and God tells us immediately, Vayehi Or, and the first thing God created, Vayomer Elokim, God said, Yehi Or, let there be light. Let there be light, because that is the objective. And when you find yourself in a dark place, know that this is not the purpose, and know that even though we don't understand, and often don't understand why we're in that given situation, but hope and believe and know that we will overcome. Not only overcome, we will grow, we will prosper, we will we will reach a height that we would not have reached without it, although we don't understand and we reject any tragedies that we are going through. But nevertheless, it is something that we need to know, that when we go through such darkness, what's our response? Our response is light, to bring light, to respond to darkness with light, and that we know and we hope and we are absolutely positive that we will come and overcome, and we will bring more light out of the situation, as we always do. I mean, there is so many examples to that of what has happened to us, to Israel, and the pain and tragedy has then brought about benefits in so many ways to the world around us. And again, I have to underscore, as I say all the time, this is not a reason or a justification for it happening. This is just how we respond. That's who we are. We have resolve. We have a deep knowledge and hope that we move on. There is a very sort of beautiful insight in the Parsha, which is that one of the greatest tragedies of humanity happened in Genesis, in Bereshit. One of the most known stories is the story of Cain going ahead and killing his brother Hevel, which at that time was 1/4 of the world. So, in terms of percentage-wise, it was the greatest genocide of history. And the Medrash tells us something interesting. The Medrash tells us that Adam and Eve did not know what to do with their child that was just killed. And they were, of course, deeply grieving. And they said, how can we go on? We just lost our child. And the Medrash tells us that God showed them a raven, a bird, the raven. Go ahead, and there was another dead raven. And God showed God showed Adam and Eve that a fellow raven went ahead, dug a little hole, and buried the dead bird. And that was a message to Adam and Eve of what to do. And of course, the question that's asked is a couple of questions. Number one, why specifically a raven? And number two, what's so complicated? God says already in the Torah, Afar ata, you are dust, and to dust you shall return. So why was it so difficult and complicated that Adam and Eve needed a raven to show them what to do? What's the deeper message over here? So one of the explanations given is when the Psalms, when King David uses an image, not an imagery, but an example of a cruel animal or creation. King David uses the raven, stating that the raven even neglects its children, and God somehow intervenes and makes sure that that the children of the raven are fed. In other words, the raven is referred to as a bird which is an achzor. An achzor means it has this element of cruelty in its nature. And what God was the message over here from the raven is that when Adam has in front of him his child, and he's saying, okay, how do I move forward? God showed him that even the raven, who by nature is an achzor, by nature has cruelty, went ahead and showed the ultimate kindness, because burial is referred to as a chesed shel emes. The Torah refers to when when Jacob asks of his son Joseph. He says, when I die, I ask of you to please do a chesed shel emes, a kindness of truth, and please go ahead and bury me. And as Rashi and commentaries explain, that burial is considered the ultimate kindness because the person does not pay you back. So the deeper message over here that God was showing Adam and Eve, yes, you just went through the most difficult tragedy that you can go through. The answer, not to the question of why, but the answer or response in terms of what do I do now, is focus your energy in kindness, in giving in the most pure and best way, and that's how you will be able to go on. Now, it reminds me of a story that I saw or I read about. I want to step back for a moment and I'll get back to the story. In the past, I've also shared a insight also on Genesis that I heard from Rabbi Twersky, who was quoting one of the commentaries. And the commentary was addressing the following topic and question in Genesis, in the first portion of Genesis. When God creates man, says, God said, Vayomer Elokim na'aseh Adam, let us make man. Let us make man. Rashi, the Uber commentary, the most known commentary on the Torah, asks the question, what does this mean, na'aseh Adam, let us make man? I believe in some circles this was used as a mistake, an error, to prove that there's, God forbid, plurality in godliness, or in God. So, but Rashi gives the answer. And the reason why it says over here, Na'aseh Adam, let us make man, is because God, in his respect and humility to the heavenly angels and celestial beings, is turning to them and saying, let us make man, since man is so important and has such power, as will be explained. Therefore, out of respect and humility, he turns to them and says, let us make man. And then Rashi says, lest you think that God actually created together with the heavenly beings, afterwards it says clearly, Vayivra Elokim, God himself created. It's just when he, before and in his discussion about creation of man, he says, Na'aseh Adam, let us make man. Okay. Rabbi Twersky, who I heard once a lecture of him via YouTube, it was, even though I have had the honor and merit to hear him in person, says the following beautiful insight. Again, he was quoting a commentary. I don't remember who he was quoting. When God says, Na'aseh Adam, let us make man, he's turning to and addressing man himself. And he says to man, let us, you and I, God and man that I'm about to create, let us together create man. What does that mean? What's the explanation? Seemingly does not make sense. And the explanation is as follows. Man is the only creation that has freedom of choice, has full freedom of choice, as the Torah again and again reiterates, that God says, see, I've given place before you good and bad. Ubacharta b'chaim, you should choose life, you should choose good. And that is one of the explanations of the meaning that God that it says in Genesis, that God created man in his image. It means just like God has freedom of choice, God gave us that trust and freedom of choice. Animals don't have freedom of choice. They don't make decisions based on good and bad. They make decisions based on instinct, based on emotions. And therefore, you cannot essentially call an animal bad or good. A lion is not bad because he kills a gazelle to eat. Or it's not bad if he lets the gazelle live when he's not hungry. Or it's not good, when he lets the gazelle live when he's not hungry. It's part of nature. It's part of instinct. Man was given the ability and the distinction and the unique quality and purpose and mission to make the right choices. So this is the meaning when God turns to a human being and says, let us make man. God says to the human being the following. He says like this: when you act only based on your instincts, based on your animal drives, based on your temptations, based on your materialistic drives, and just based on what feels good, then you're an animal. You're not a human being. And in some ways, you're worse than an animal because you have the ability to make choices, but you don't. You just act on what feels good. In order for you to be Na'aseh Adam, to be a person, to be a human being, Adam, as what distinguishes you, and what makes you a human being is when you use your choices, and you use your ability to choose, you make good choices. So God says to the human being, and he pleads with him, Na'aseh Adam, I could do my part, but then it's up to you whether you're an animal or you're a human being. When you allow your animalistic cruelty, which in that case you're actually worse than an animal, to be governed by those emotions, or you allow yourself to truly determine what's right and wrong. And of course, God gave us a Torah to instruct us and guide us and tell us what are good choices and what are the wrong choices. And that's why Torah is so important. Because without Torah, human beings can make choices which they maybe perceive that's good or right or free to choose what you think is good, and it could be so destructive. So he gave us a Torah, but here Hashem says, Na'aseh Adam, let us make man. You and I together. God does what he does, and then the rest is up to us. And that works also in the most tragic of cases, as Viktor Frankl also elaborates in great detail, in man's search for meaning. So getting back to the discussion and to the title, Tears of Pain, Tears of Joy, and our discussion of that everything, even the most tragic occurrences, its objective is to get to light. I want to share a story. I mean, we have witnessed and seen in the last week so many heroic stories that have been shared. I've shared some of it in the discussions last week. So much self-sacrifice. I heard a story Friday morning about a 70-year-old that jumped on a young woman when there was either missiles or bullets flying, and said, look, I'm already 70, you're a young lady, your chance of surviving if I jump on top of you increases dramatically. Let me jump on top of you, protect you. If I gotta go, I gotta go. I mean, there's so many heroic stories that have been shared that where people have taken the darkest moments and turned them into light or inspiration. That is who we are, Na'aseh Adam. That is a true human being. I read a story where after the Holocaust, after the war, I'm getting a little bit to the middle of the story. Let me start over again. A fellow related that he was at a synagogue in the UK, United Kingdom. And, every synagogue, or many synagogues, of course, you have a rabbi, you have a chazan, you have a gabbai, you have a administrator, you have an office staff. And then many synagogues, or most synagogues, also have the beloved candy man. So in this synagogue, the fellow relates that the candy man was given up like a really nice bag of candies, more than the usual, being the sort of the executive director here at Chabad of Coral Springs, I get the kids are very excited when they get candies, but I get plenty of complaints from the mothers of that their kids are being given too much sugar. But be it as it may, you definitely can't please everybody in this world. Be it as it may, this fellow was like, this goes back a number of years where I guess that people were a little less concerned about the extra sugar, and he gave like a nice, very impressive bag of candy. So someone asked him, what's this bag of candies? He related the following. He says, during the war, during the Shoah, during the Holocaust, I lost my wife, my children were murdered by the Nazis. And he says, and after the war, I survived. I was devastated. Did not want to get married, did not want to have children, and just couldn't move on with life. I was a mess. I was just a mess. Crying. Just couldn't go on. Someone suggested that I write to the Rebbe. Write to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Nachum Mendel Schneerson. Or that I meet the Rebbe, actually. So I met the Rebbe. And the Rebbe told me the following. The Rebbe said, and by the way, just as a side note, the Rebbe himself survived the Holocaust and lost loved ones in the Holocaust. He lost his own brother. He lost a brother-in-law and some other family members. And the Rebbe told him like this. He says, your tears, really at its source, as painful as those tears are, they're actually tears of love. They're tears of the deep love that you have for your family. So by doing nothing, you're taking the deep love that you have, and you're just suppressing it and not allowing it to be expressed. This is what I suggest, the Rebbe said. Start with a small act of love. In the synagogue that you pray, start with giving out candies to the children as a reward for their good davening, their good prayers, their good learning. Give them a candy so that your deep pain, which is really at its source, comes from the deepest of loves, allow it to express itself. He says, I came back. The Rebbe told me, the Rebbe, charged me with this mission, and as difficult as it was, by respect for the Rebbe, I filled up my pocket with candies. I came to the synagogue, but I couldn't get myself to do it. I just couldn't do it. I was too zerbrochen, too broken. Well, a kid came over to me and asked me, he says, do you have a candy? So kid comes over and asks, I have candies in my pocket. I went ahead, I gave the child a candy. What happens when you give one child in the synagogue a candy? In no time, you have a whole line. He says, and that's how it started. And the result of that, it sort of allowed me to break out of my deep depression. I did eventually get married, and I rebuilt. I built up a family again with children and so on. In this last week, we have and continue to have tears of deep pain. And there are levels in the depth of that pain based on how much you've suffered. God forbid if you have hostages of your family. Although someone asked me today, they came to shul, the synagogue, and they said, how is your family? I have a daughter in Israel. I have a stepbrother in Israel. I have many cousins, nieces, and nephews. And I answered. I said, I appreciate your question, and my immediate family is doing fine. But in truth, I want to tell you, we're all family. And my family is not fine. My family is suffering. So, but there are different levels of pain. And to the people who are going through the most deepest levels of pain, I'm not here to tell them right now what to do, because it's right now they're dealing with extremely deep pain. But to us who are in deep pain of what's going on in Israel. That deep pain is coming from deep love. And we have to make sure that we express that love and we utilize it and we direct it in all areas that we can, in sending whatever we find is needed for Israel. I want to underscore, I've said this from the beginning, and I've seen this posted from soldiers in Israel. Probably the most important need, or definitely one of the most important needs right now, is the PR battle. We have many in media, in Western media, that are not our friends. And this, regardless of the horrendous and horrific tragedy we've gone through, they will focus and they will make the attempt to turn the tide and world opinion on Israel. We are in that PR battle, which has ramifications. It affects local governments. It affects their support, the pressure or non-pressure that they will put on Israel to finish the job, because Israel has to finish the job. Every time the job is left unfinished, unfortunately and tragically, it causes less fear in our enemies. It causes more deaths, both on our side and on the Palestinian side, because strength avoids war, it avoids harm and death on all sides. We must finish the job. But I'm not a military strategist. I'm just saying this as I see it, and as I heard very clearly from my holy Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson. But more importantly, I don't know if more importantly is the right word, but we are in this PR war, and whatever you can post, and if you're capable of debunking negative information, false information about Israel, you must, it is our duty to do so. We all have our circles, and you don't know where it gets, and the influence and impact it will have, because again, government responds to public pressure. So God created the world with a base, bracha. Let's see that bracha openly and in a revealed way. Vayhi or, let us get to the light. Let us be part of bringing that light. Let us take the tears of pain, which are motivated and come from a tears of deeper love. Let's direct it by sending and acting on those emotions, by sending love, by sending support, by sending supplies, by sending charity, by doing mitzvahs. And I want to highlight 4 mitzvahs. The mitzvah of putting on tefillin, which brings fear upon our enemies. The mitzvah of mezuzah, fixing a mezuzah on your door or having your mezuzah checked. And we here at Chabad will sponsor your mezuzah if you cannot afford. You will have your mezuzah checked. We will sponsor your pair of tefillin. The mitzvah of tzedakah, charity, of course, especially to the needs in Israel. But all forms of charity are an expression of our unity. And the mitzvah of lighting Shabbat candles for women. These are the 4 mitzvahs that I want to highlight today. Together, we will bring the light. We will merit the tears. We will merit to the day that the prophet says, Umocha Hashem dima, Umocha Hashem Elokim dima me'al kol panim. And God will wipe away the tears from every single face, from all face of all of humanity, with the prophet and the belief, one of the 13 principles of faith, which is the ultimate light, Vayhi or, the ultimate light, which is the coming of Mashiach speedily in our days. Thank you for being part of this Torah class. Please share words of Torah, words that uplift. I've gotten much feedback of people. I know on Thursday night we sent out the video. People were in panic. Well, as soon as you share words of Torah, fear has a way of growing into this frenzy. But when you share words of Torah, which has a special koach, a special strength, it relaxes us, it talks to our soul. So share these words of Torah, and Am Yisrael Chai, Hinei lo yanum velo yishan, shomer Yisrael. Hinei lo yanum velo yishan, shomer Yisrael. I just made it up, that song, putting the tune together with the song. But that's a little bit on the lighter side. But you need to be able to share positivity, and let's only be able to share good news. Have a fantastic week.